Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
No, but we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Connected Life peeps, Justin here. And today we have one of our life consultants that is one of our master consultants, Rachel Hughes, with us.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Abby's not joining us today, but Rachel and I are going to jump into the deep end of the pool in today's process. But I'm so excited to have you on. If you guys have listened before in the past, Rachel's been on with us. She shared a bunch about her journey with her husband and the loss of her mother-in-law and a lot of things like that. And one of the things about you, Rachel, is that you're super brilliant with emotional health.
Aww.
And usually I think people who are brilliant with emotional health, they came from a really bad background.
It's like our survival tools, right? We're like, I'm going to get out of this by being really smart.
That's so real. Like, I have to fix how broken I feel.
Oh, yeah.
It's really
That
real.
feels true.
Well, one of the things that I want to do today, I want to start with something. So Rachel and I planned on jumping into talking about love, but we're going to try something different here in this moment than what our plan was.
It's like a surprise to me because I don't even know what you're going to do. So I'm the audience too. I'm like, along for the ride. What's about to happen?
Is your anxiety escalating?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, let's start with that. So when Rachel and I sat down, she began to share a little bit about like sitting down in this moment with me.
Yeah.
Would you be open to sharing about that?
100%. Yeah.
So tell me about it.
Yeah. I mean, I was telling Justin, I was like, you know, even though I talk for a living or do sort of like emotional health stuff in this space often as a job, there's never a time that I'm not at least a little bit scared.
Yeah.
So it's like a constant buzzing. Like even as I'm narrating it in my body right now, I'm like, oh, I can feel my hands are shaking.
Yeah.
I can feel a little bit of like tightness in my gut. I just feel aware that like just the act of I'm going to take a moment to share myself with a broader audience immediately activates fear and vulnerability for me.
So you feel really exposed? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, this is really good because I'm curious, what do you feel like? Like when I asked you to do this and you're on your way over here, what started happening for you?
Oh, well, I like almost had a breakdown. Well, I think, I think transitions often can be challenging for me. So going from one space of thought to very quickly another space of thought.
Right. Because I randomly interrupted your day and was like, hey, would you come participate in a podcast with me?
Totally. So you called me up and I had somewhere else that I was going to be and somebody else that I was going to go hang out with. And then Justin's like, hey, do you want to do this podcast? And I'm like in my soul, like I have a commitment that I just say yes to stuff like this that scares me before I have a chance to think about it sometimes. So I'm just like, it's Justin. I know I love Justin. I know I trust Justin. I know I'm safe with Justin. So yes, I'll do the podcast. And I can literally feel my body being like, what the hell did you just want some more? And so I was on my way to that. And then I said yes to Justin. I got off the phone and then my whole body went into nervous energy state. So it was like vibration down my whole body. And
did you find your legs were twitching and hands were shaking? And...
My hands are shaking right now, even as I'm talking about it, as you can see. Yeah, my hands shake a lot. And it's like I immediately go a little cold. Yeah. And it's almost like my protective mechanisms is like, I'm going to try to leave my body. Like want to try to float on out. And bye-bye now. So you leave our body. And so in this moment, I'm sort of being intentional about even just noticing that and staying present with that.
Yeah. What do you feel like? Like, okay, for instance, what in the background of your head do you believe is going to happen? Like,
it's a good question.
So that's something that comes up for me. I'm like, what do you believe that there's somehow you could fail this, or I would be disappointed, or give me some thoughts on that.
Well, I think, for me, a lot of it goes back to childhood. That's just how I'm always thinking about all of my triggers. Most of the time is how is this connected deeper to my story, which I think is a skill that you learn to do over
Yeah, you have
and
to
over.
build that muscle, don't you?
You have to build that muscle of awareness of your own story. So I can tell often when I need to do something public, it's like I go into, I'm the 6-year-old little girl and I'm looking at my dad and I'm sharing with him something that I want him to see. And he's sort of just looking at me.
Like I am now.
Like
Just
Justin
looking
is
at you.
right now, just sort of looking at me with not a ton of facial responses. And then I get anxious and panicky and then start going, well, maybe I could tell my dad all the things that I like, that it's the best. And here's and I get in a ramble space of anxiety and just where I want him to notice me and want him to know that I'm okay.
What does so when you talked about your dad's face, right?
Yeah.
What did his lack of expression, what was it communicating to you?
Well, I love this question so much because I'm a huge attachment nerd. I'm a hugely into attachment. And there's actually like a video online that you can watch. I think it's called like the still face experiment, which is where they set a little baby and they're just like interacting as they would. And then they have kind of like the mom in front of the baby. And then for the first couple minutes, the mom's sort of like interacting and like playing. And then they're smiling and engaging and paying attention. And then the still face experiment is they ask the mom to sort of just like pause and then just do a blank, like a no expression. And you can tell the moment when the little baby like notices that there's no reflection or reaction and they start melting down. They're like, right? And then thankfully they don't hold that for very long. They tell the mom like, okay, go ahead and, respond back. And then she does. And we'll be like, oh, hey, I'm here. I'm back. I'm present. I'm here with you. And then that soothes the little kid. So I think it's similarly in my own soul. It's just this feeling of like, I'm going to do something and then I'm going to experience abandonment. You're going to not be here. You're going to not be present. And I think, because my dad, he was a very like logical man. And I think I felt a sense of like, are you present here with me? Am I okay? Is my presence here with you enough? And can I just be here with you as you are here with me? Or do I need to do something special? Or do I need to do something important? Or do I need to perform in some way or get you interested? Or what do I need to do to keep your eyes on me and keep love open towards me?
That's interesting. I can imagine that probably a lot of people battle with that in relationships, where that's where that plastic smile comes on, that fake facade, that inauthenticity, where it's, I'm just trying to perform, I'm trying to do something to keep the connection between me and another human being, that they would want to choose me, that they'd want to be around me, that they would see me as special or important and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree.
And I would imagine that a lot of people like unconsciously are having the emotions of wanting to win people over and they don't even know it. Like, can I win this situation over? And their anxiety goes up, wondering each time they walk into something, will I be able to win someone over so that I don't feel rejected or I don't feel unlovable or whatever that happens to be.
Totally. Like, what do I need to do to generate some feeling of safety?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do I need to portray to you? How do I need to perform? How do I make you interested in me or like me in order for me to feel safe?
What do you think initially you'd feel like if in the recording of this process, this was a complete disaster, like it just didn't work and we had to like re-record or we couldn't even record, like you melted down and you couldn't record and I had to like find another solution? What would happen for you? Like, what are some of the variances of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the initial feeling that I feel is shame, fear of disappointing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I do imagine being like, it feels hard to picture being really messy
Mm.
and then sort of being fine.
It feels hard to picture the idea that like, oh, this could fall apart and we could be like, I don't know where we're going with this. And then, oh, it's okay.
Totally.
Let's do another thing.
Yeah. I think that like when I think about my story too, like I think that's a consistent in my life, right? The sense of like not wanting to be sort of seen as messy and then it sort of be okay.
What
That makes sense.
in what part of your story, like, what part of your story amplifies the part of not wanting to be seen as messy?
Oh, I mean, I was a missionary kid.
Right.
And so there's a sense of like our protection of our family unit is based on that we're got it together.
Yeah, we're the missionaries. We're out to save people.
We're better than the mess. We have somehow learned to hijack and hack having our shit together.
It's
so much that we've made a job out of it. Yeah. And I do think like, I think this is true for a lot of people who had just, normal parents that also had a lot of pain, which is that like my parents didn't always know how to meet me inside of my own humanity and attach to me and connect with me and soothe me as I was messy.
Mm-hmm.
I also think like I had an interesting like way of coming into the world is sort of like what Abby would sort of call like the miracle child. Like I was sort of that in my family.
Wow.
And so I'm in the sense of like my parents were really felt like I was their gift from God, which is both really wonderful and like beautiful and sort of I think is something that is meant to sort of give you an inherent sense of like, oh, I'm really like God wanted me to be here. I am like worthy of being here in this space. But instead the underlying thing was like, well, I got to prove that I'm like really good and like earn my space here on this planet.
Earn the title.
Yeah.
Of God's gift to us.
It's like, yeah, earn the title of like, aren't I like the special one who came here to save the whole family and to save the whole world? Are I so wonderful? And so, yeah, there was this sense of like needing to earn space, I think. Yeah.
When you're sitting there with me and I'm starting to ask these questions, what do you notice happening in your body?
Yeah, I mean, I feel just aware of that sort of like jittery energy, for lack of a better term, sort of like running up and down the center of my body. Again, I still kind of feel a little bit of that energy in my hands. So I would say it's maybe gone down a little bit just as we've talked a little bit more here. And then I just feel a sense of like, a sense of smallness.
Describe small to me.
Well, it almost feels like my perception of my body in this moment feels little, if that makes sense. Like it almost feels like a little bit of a shrinking here. And it doesn't actually feel like fully negative. Like there's a part of it, even just talking about it, I feel a little bit like, oh, like I'm little and that's okay. Justin loves me. I'm kind of safe to be little here.
Yeah.
And then also like, oh yeah, this reminds me of how hard it was to be that little girl and feel the challenge of, I got to be special.
Yeah.
And I'm worried that I'm not.
You know, one of the emotions that I feel as you're talking, because this is really cool. Thank you for like, we hijacked what we were planning on chatting about, right? I hijacked it.
I'm happy to go along.
And I was like, internally, I'm like, I just want to go down this road and not in an experiment, but kind of just like, oh, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And so as I'm tracking along, like I can't help but feel this deep sense of sadness. Like I want to cry. And so part of me is like, if I'm kind of tuning in and feeling maybe a portion, I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm like, I wonder if behind a lot of the anxiety for Rachel, there's a bunch of sadness that's possibly there. It doesn't have to be, but what do you think when I say something like that?
I mean, I think I feel very resonated with that.
I think there's something that resonates with that.
Yeah. And I think that does feel true. Like, I think there was sort of like a deep sadness related to, I think, just that longing for like wanting to get my, like, talking about the whole still face thing that I was talking about before, like just that longing of like, I feel like I'm trying all these things to try to like be special and be whatever it is that I imagine my dad wants me to be, but really I just want him to like look at me with soft eyes. And, you know, the same with my mom, I think. And again, really wanting to make sure that it doesn't come across as villainizing of them. Like, I genuinely have tons of softness towards both of them. But there was just like this longing inside the heart of the little girl, just to feel like someone meets me with a feeling of soft eyes and warmth in their face towards me. And just this feeling of the presence of how I am in this moment is really okay with you. And I think that's like the unresolved longing and need of my sort of little girl on the inside that sort of just consistently wants that and is afraid that she won't get that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, as you're talking, I can't help but think, I really love you, Rachel. I'm sitting here going, I'm thinking about the places you're really brave. And I'm thinking about, like, I know that you're actually incredible at emotional health stuff, like, and helping people walk through stuff. I'm pretty in awe of your ability to articulate and things like that, but it's not the thing that makes me feel endeared towards you. You know, like, I find that all really cool. And I love those aspects, those expressions of what you've learned. I mean, it's just, it's very unique. But again, it's not what I'm endeared towards. I'm endeared towards the tenderness that you have. I'm endeared towards the authenticity that you express. I'm endeared towards your ability to allow love to impact you. Like, when someone takes time to see you or hold you or care about you, like, you let it land. And for someone that came from many difficult experiences of pain that you had, it'd be very easy for you to put up walls and be really resistant towards it, feeling like, oh, this is unsafe. I can't really let this impact me. But there's something beautiful about your ability to let love land. I think I'm not proud of your ability to be compliant. Like, there's that part of survival that goes, see, I'm compliant, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm not proud of your ability to, like, I don't look at that and go, that's the thing, that's the staple of value. I'm like, oh no, I don't need your compliance. But that doesn't mean you're bad. I'm just like, I don't need your compliance. The thing that resonates most is again, going back to authenticity and your ability to acknowledge that you are really messy and you don't have to, in many aspects, even though there's a war to like want to perform, there's also this huge thing of humility inside of you. It's like, I'm so effed up. I do not have this together.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, even when I asked you, you know, like, immediately when you were in here, you were able to communicate, like, well, I can feel anxiety in me. And I get so much anxiety when I jump on to speak, whether it's like teaching, even though you're like profound at teaching, like you're able to like, a lot of people would want to hide that. A lot of people would have too much shame just because, like, oh, I should have arrived somewhere. And you're like, I haven't arrived anywhere. I'm having anxiety jumping into a phone call with people and stuff. And I think that's really beautiful, your capacity to communicate that. It's so humble. And I can't help but think, like, I like you the way that you are.
Thank you, Justin.
And it's a really beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Who you are is really beautiful.
Thank you. That feels resonant with me in this moment. Thank you. I feel that opening in my own heart. This is what I would say if I could like help the world have one. Well, I don't want to pick one skill, but I would say it's directly impacted my ability to receive love is just to be able to, in the moment, narrate my vulnerability and how I'm experiencing this present moment with you. And just being able to be like, oh yeah, I'm feeling anxiety in my body in this moment. This is where I'm at. This is the vulnerable part of me. And then even this moment, as you say that, being able to just narrate, wow, I can feel a softening in my whole self based on what you just said.
Yeah.
And I can feel the love that you are offering, like touching a heart of me that feels really like, oh, wow, that feels like water in the desert to my soul. And that feels so good to feel like met in that place. And then even just like, this is why I wish that I could share the world this like skill of just being able to narrate, because as I narrate it, I deepen my experience of feeling impacted by it. And I'm even telling my brain, my body, my nervous system, everything like, this is a moment that is evidence of love. Evidence that this moment here with Justin was like a pocket, was a doorway in to that little part of me that feels so vulnerable and small and scared, actually getting met with someone who is warm and caring. And the more times that I narrate that, oh, this is how I'm experiencing love in this moment, love is here. And the more times I've done that over and over and over again and helped my body understand, like in this moment, there is an opening in my heart to love. And I can feel my heart open to it, and I can feel what it feels like to let it affect me. The more times I have experiences like that, the more I look over my story and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's been so much evidence of love. There's been so much evidence of love. There's been moments with Justin over and over and over and over and over again. He's been evidence of love in my life. There's been moments of Abby being evidence of love in my life, moments of my husband with evidence of love in my life. In every single avenue of my life, there's been moments of love. In every season of my life, I can look past through every season of my life, and I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, but I can literally like narrate it and remember like there has never been a moment that love was too far away from me, that it wasn't something that a part of me could grab onto. Like I even think about just even my body, you know, like when we're thinking about babies, there's a thing called like failure to thrive, which is basically like if babies aren't picked up and held and sort of rocked, then they literally just die.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just think about that. The fact that I am here, the fact that I am alive, the fact that I'm breathing, the fact that I'm present is I am evidence that I've been loved.
That there was love somewhere.
That there was love somewhere in my story. That the fact that I'm here, the fact that I'm open to love now means that I have had love.
That's really powerful. I think that when we look, if there's stories of trauma that we have, oftentimes it's very easy to be blinded to where love existed. And there's also stories where people deny that there was problems in their past.
Yeah.
And they won't look at the problems.
100%.
And they do it because they're really scared that all of a sudden that will dismiss the love that did exist.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you want to elaborate kind of a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I'm a life consultant and work with people consistently, I'm always sort of looking at like what are the blocks that sort of keep us from getting to really engage with like unconditional love and compassion for our story, right? And so this is one of those I think that can happen is, you know, I think trauma brain or, you know, brain that has gone through a lot of pain just naturally thinks of things in black and white.
Yeah.
And that's how we think as kids too. We are often as kids really thinking about who's to blame?
Right.
Right? Are you to blame, mom and dad, or am I to blame?
Yeah.
And often in our own story, like, we're deciding things like that based on what is sort of the most through path to survival, right? So if we're a kid and we're like, how do I survive this hard experience? It's going to be more supportive generally for a little kid to think, I'm to blame.
Right. Then I can change me.
That I can change me because then I'm in control.
Yeah.
Then I'm safe. And then I don't have to think about this love from the parent being removed, because it's crushing for the soul of a little kid to think that people that made me may not love me, or it's a crushing idea to the human soul. And so I think in the journey of healing, a lot of times people get really dysregulated or get really triggered, or whatever word you want to put in there, of like thinking about trying to sort of challenge this idea of like, I'm to blame completely. And then maybe there's sometimes I think people get really scared that we're saying our parents are completely to blame, right? Like there's like an all or nothing, black or white. Who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy in the story?
Absolutely.
And it's hard to come out of that, because that's the way that when those memories were being laid down, the way that we were thinking about those experiences was from a black and white perspective.
Totally.
And so I think for me, as I've been in therapy for a very long time, talking about myself for a absurd amount of my life. I've been in therapy since I was 11 years old. So I like to joke that my entire adult life I've been talking about myself to somebody for a lot of money. And so a lot of what's helped me is even just like holding both. Right. Holding the idea of like, what I do is I do this thing called like a bridge statement, which is like putting an and in between. So I sort of go like, my mom was a really joyful, warm, artistic, beautiful woman. And I had a lot of experiences of feeling codependent with her.
Yeah.
My dad was a really wise, smart, funny man. And I experienced a lot of feeling alone and unseen inside of our dynamic. And so it's just this idea of like not having to take away from the love that they did give, or not
the
having
capacity that they did have,
or even like who they would be authentically.
Right.
Like I had a conversation with a friend of mine this morning where we're talking about like sort of imagining, who our parents are sort of authentically, but unfortunately a lot of times we're being raised by our parents' protective system more than we're being raised sort of by
when their nervous system is triggered and stuff like that.
When they're regulated, and when they, a psychologist that I really like, his name is Bruce Perry, and he says, he's a neuroscientist guy. He says, with frequent experiences of love, even the most unloved become loving.
Wow.
And I really like that sentence, because I sort of think that about my parents too. Like, I can hold space for the idea that, like, had they felt really safe, had they felt really loved, had they felt like their needs were met, they would have been naturally loving towards me.
Right.
Right? Like, that's just like the beauty of humanity, is that even the ones of us who are the most unloved and the most traumatized through frequent experiences of consistent, safe love, we become loving. And so holding that, like, I can see that in my parents. I can believe that of who they are, and hold space for the pain. It's
interesting because one of the things you're talking about is the reality of the truth of our being. Like, there are these alternate expressions of ourselves.
Yeah.
When we are, you talk about whether it's, being in a triggered place, or our nervous system's being hijacked, or whatever it is, or it's this relationship we have with fear, or shame, or self-hatred.
Or just our protective system.
Right.
Yeah.
And like the truth of our being, if all creation was created in and through unrelenting, unconditional love, The truth of our being is that we're not these monsters that are just out to hurt people. The truth of our being is that we are kindness, we are gentleness, we are patience, we are peace. That's who we really are. That's our authentic design.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the places where our soul has been so twisted by the destructive reactions of others, and further twisted by our own destructive choices that we act out of and continue to perpetuate in our lives.
Yeah.
What happens is we get so far away from the truth of our being. We get so far away from our original design, but it's all still there under the surface. And like what you're saying is that like love reveals the truth of our being. Like the more love that we experience and we allow ourselves to be receptive to, what it will really do is it'll illuminate what was always there.
Wow.
And I think that like people are trying to form something that already existed and just needs to be revealed.
That's such a good line.
And so you think about the idea that all these self-protective mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
These things, these survival techniques, these reactions that we have. This isn't who I am. I don't need to figure out, how do I put it? It's almost like they're a cloak. They're a cloak that we're wearing that's covering up who we are. And once we start getting connected enough to love, we realize we don't need these things. These things aren't beneficial to us. They're not actually saving us. They felt like they did. They felt like they helped us survive. They helped, and in many cases, maybe they did. They got us through moments, but this isn't who we are. And we start to, as we go on in life and we see what love can look like, and we can see what it looks like to actually feel protected and to actually feel safe.
Yeah.
We take these jackets off that are dirty and torn and we go, I don't need that anymore. I don't need rage anymore. I don't need self-hatred anymore. I don't need hatred towards other people. I don't need these deep, intense like levels of fear and anxiety. And we begin to go like, I don't need that. It's an unconscious thing, but as love gets in and we go, oh, I'm actually safe to be who I was always intended to be. This person who is kind and gentle and patient and understanding. And I'm still in a process of shedding these alternate like realities off of me, or shedding these alternative selves. It's not who I am. It's not the truth of my being. But again, the more I get safe, the more I actually start getting restored back to that.
Yeah. I really like what you're saying. I think it's so sort of on the money for my own journey too. I think that, I was listening to, again, you'll hear me reference so many things because I'm just a huge nerd and I like to learn things constantly. But I was listening to somebody the other day, and they were talking about, they were therapists, and they were talking about working with inner critic in people, right? And they were like, sometimes I notice that if we get really caught up in trying to war with the inner critic, that can often, produce its own challenges inside of that, right? But what he was saying was, what I often do is I try to really help people connect with their sort of like ideal nurturer first. And like really allow this sense of like, can you connect to what a really kind teacher would do, or really kind coach would do? Or he even gave this analogy of like, if you had a little kid and you had to send them to school, would you rather send your little kid to a teacher that was really critical, or a teacher that was really warm and compassionate and helped and, worked through? It's like they're both serving a function. Right. They're both helping the little kid learn and grow. They're both like wanting to help the little kid face their fears and be challenged and, grab onto new ideas. But of course, if we were a little kid's parent, we would want them to experience the warm, compassionate teacher that really cared about the kid's education, but also like did it in a really warm way. And I really like that as sort of like building up this experience of like, like our true sort of authentic self being almost like the coach or the warm teacher. And what I notice often happens is when we feel really connected to that idea, the sort of the parts of us that are like the inner critic or those sort of protective parts that are really serving a function, right? They almost sort of get to relax a little bit because they get to be like, oh, like I see that our needs are going to get met, right? I see that like there's somebody here that's going to, I know it sounds kind of funny and like a little bit schizophrenic to talk about all the parts of ourselves, but this sort of sense of like, oh, somebody is here that is on my team. That's my coach that really does want me to be able to like, you know, thrive in life, but is maybe going to help facilitate that thriving in a way that's, you know, not through the spirit of judgment and criticism and shame and that. But what I like about that analogy is it's, you know, it's really saying like I acknowledge the function of those sort of protective parts inside of my own system where I'm saying like, oh yeah, like when I'm criticizing myself or when I'm set, like when I don't feel as much sort of in my authentic, most loving self, right? Like it's just a protective part. It's just a part that's stepping in here that's saying, really want to make sure that Rachel is safe. Really want to make sure that her needs get met and really worried. But that's not going to happen.
Totally. It's interesting because that is a way to communicate a compassionate, it's a way to communicate in compassion about the things that feel kind of messy. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that these ways that we self-protect, when we look at the overall overarching reality, they're not beneficial. They're not actually beneficial to getting us to what we really want.
Yeah, totally.
But when we look at it through that lens, we don't have to go into some further self-judgment. We just go, oh yeah, like of course this is how I'd function. Like this is the only way that I currently understand or know how to or have been trained to survive or get to the love that I feel like I'm trying to get to or the safety that I feel like I'm trying to get to. And that's where it helps because like when you can have compassion and understanding about why you're functioning the way that you are, you don't further perpetuate more problems.
Exactly.
You actually can then begin to, through compassion and understanding, begin to get what you do need.
Totally. And often that part is like what is actually going to be the sort of the antidote to all self-protection is unconditional love.
Right.
Right. But if I see that part in me and I inherently judge that part of me, well, judgment pushes away, compassion pulls closer. Right. And so I'm always thinking like, even in those parts of me that are like, can feel really frustrating. I can feel really polarized with like, why are you messing up my life?
Yeah.
But if I can sort of see like, okay, what might the function of this thing actually be? And what the positive intention means. Like what the positive intention of this protective part of me might be. It doesn't mean that I'm saying I'm overjoyed
totally
with the way in which this protective mechanism is manifesting in my life. It's not saying that I'm advocating for it or think that it's a brilliant plan all the time. I'm just saying, oh, I'm seeing that there's a positive intention.
Right. There is a reason why it exists, that it's trying to get to some very positive thing usually.
Yeah, it's trying to get a need met or trying to be self-protective. And I can also look through my story and be like, there was some moment in my life where some little part of me thought this was a brilliant idea.
Yeah. This is going to solve all my chaotic problems I'm having inside of this family.
Yeah, it was a solution to the problem, right? Like, am I thinking in my life now this is the best solution? No. But at the time, in my little kid, limited resource mind, was a brilliant solution to the problem, right? Like I was thinking about that the other day because I've had a complicated relationship with food for my whole life.
Yeah.
I didn't really get to know that until more later on in life when I had a life-threatening eating disorder in my adulthood. But really, when I look back on my story, it was like, oh my gosh, I've had food things my whole life. But I was thinking about this feeling of like emotionally eating, and I was really noticing that I had a lot of pockets of judgment sort of left over about that. And so I was thinking about, you know, my story with emotional eating and how that came about. And I had a remembrance of a moment where we were around the dinner table, and my mom used to sort of make a joke, which I think was sort of meant to be lighthearted, but she would call me like a camel. She'd be like, Rachel, like, doesn't really eat for like a long period of time. But then when she's like excited about the meal. She just like won't stop. Like she just like stores up for forever. And so I remember feeling a lot of like shame about what is sort of perceived as overeating. Like, is it bad for me to overeat or not? So I'd remember, sitting at the dinner table and really not connected to my own body cues and sort of being like, I got to suppress my hunger, right? Like, because I don't want to feel shame at the dinner table for eating more than I'm, quote unquote, supposed to eat.
Wow.
Right. And then, what I remember is I'd sit in bed after and feel so hungry. Right. Mm-hmm. And so until I couldn't handle the hunger anymore. Mm-hmm. And then I'd run downstairs and I remember I do wild things like eat a jar of marinara sauce, whatever is like in the cupboard that is available, and like eat a can of corn or a jar of marinara sauce or whatever is there that I can find, I'd eat. Right. And I remember just thinking recently, like, so if that was a little bit of like a binge thing that then turned into a little bit of a coping skill, right? Yeah. Like there I was like binging to feel some sense of relief and some sense of soothing, probably be the good way of saying it.
Yeah.
And I could look back on that and sort of be like, oh, how in that story was soothing for me in that way. Brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Oh, in that moment, like it's a brilliant idea of here's this moment at the dinner table. And if I don't, suppress my appetite to then eat later, I'm going to feel really worried. In my own system, I was really worried of feeling overwhelming shame, right? Like if I eat to what I want to eat at this dinner table, I'm going to feel rejected by the family. I'm going to feel overwhelming shame. I'm going to feel like I'm the bad one. I'm going to feel like I didn't perform the way that I'm supposed to, in the mind of a child, right? Absolutely. So like, of course, like this little girl has a brilliant idea. Yeah.
I had a thought here because, so one of the things you're talking about is that if we look at the things where we think that we're really effed up, right? Like, what is wrong with me? Why do I do this?
Yeah.
And we don't look at through the lens of compassion, we can never really get connected to the story. What compassion is really saying is I am willing to stop and look at something enough that I will go deep into the depths of the story. Like, why do I do this? Not why do I do this, but why do I do this? Awesome. What's happening? What was the history behind this? Where did that initiate? And you start going back into your past and you go, oh, that makes sense. Like there was situations set up where I couldn't get to the comfort I needed.
Yeah.
And I eventually started this thing like binge eating because this felt like it was some semblance, one aspect of it, of comfort. Because I was even thinking about that and how I had such a struggle with food for so long. Yeah. And I hated little fat Justin. It's like so disgusted by him because, he got made fun of all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you always have to eat? Why did you like do that thing? And what was wrong with you? And there was a lot of that judgment. And until I could have compassion, like, okay, what is the reason that I needed food? Oh, I needed nurture and comfort. And my being like, as a little kid, didn't know how to describe what I needed and didn't have examples of it that like felt prevalent and felt consistent.
Yeah.
Though there was comforting things, even the things that did come as comfort, I had walls up towards.
Yeah.
Because I already felt so unsafe that my protection was, oh, I can't let you in because you'll give me some love and comfort, but then you'll hurt me again.
Yeah. So you found a secure
way
to get comfort, invulnerable.
Right. Because the concept was I can get a feeling of that comfort, that care, or the pleasure or the relief.
Yeah. In a safer way.
Yeah. In a safer way. This block of cheese that I'm about to eat on.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
I'm going to eat this block of cheese and smash this package of Ritz crackers and drink a bunch of soda and sugar right now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm going to go,
I'm going to feel regulated.
I'm going to feel regulated.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm going to feel that relief, and it's not going to hurt me.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you. And what a beautiful thing that you needed that.
To elaborate on what you mean by that.
What a beautiful thing that your soul knew in order for Justin to be okay, we need to feel relief.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing that little Justin knew. In order for our soul to thrive, we need comfort.
Right.
We need love. Like, I think about it as like we are born with this like magnet in us to love. Like, I was thinking out the other day how we're just like sort of born screaming and reaching out for love with no shame.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right? Like, we come out and we're like, love, come get me. Like, we're born needing, and we're born wanting with no shame.
Right. Because we were designed, like
we were made for it.
We were made in it and through it. So it's part of our DNA. Like love is wrapped in the core of our DNA as much as water is.
100%.
Right. Like we think about, if we looked at water for the body as love for the soul, right? We cannot go more than a few days without water before our body dies.
Beautiful.
And it's that same connection. Like if we could understand, because people oftentimes are like, well, I don't need to be loved and I don't need that. That's not that's not who I am. That's just,
I'm invincible.
Yeah.
I'm unaffectable.
But they don't understand that the wiring and design at the deepest parts of us is in and through love.
Yeah.
And so our soul actually dies without that. So we're longing, that's it. We're wired to need it and to go, I need a fresh drink of water, so to say.
Yeah.
For my soul. And when we don't get it, we're looking for solutions. So again, going back to when we go into these protective mechanisms and these survival techniques and all of that stuff, this is just us trying to find a resolution.
Trying to have a solution to the problem of
to
lack
a
of
very
love.
natural thing that is needed inside of it.
Yeah. And a beautiful thing, like I think that's to me in part of reconciling with the protective parts of myself is seeing that almost like the beauty of, wow, I am so glad that this part of, like Rachel, I'm so glad for this part of your system that advocated for your need for love.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you didn't shut down and pull away and go into failure to thrive in your system of ignoring your need for love. Like, I'm so glad that you found a way, to something that was going to try to meet your need. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not saying that in and of itself has created problems.
Right.
But if I can sort of see it through that intention of like, there was a positive need that was very good that your system knew that you needed.
Right.
And I'm so glad that you didn't sort of like go quietly into the dark night saying that you didn't like have any need for that at all.
Yeah.
Like I think about all the ways that I've protected myself to survive, whether it was my childhood or my further like adult trauma. I just think like, wow, you had a brilliant idea of how to make it out alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that every part of you has been fighting for life this whole time, been fighting to find your way back to love. And I think there's something in that almost like authentic self where we sort of recognize that like there is a magnet inside of me that knows that it needs love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because going back to how you talked about the bridge statements with your parents.
Yeah.
And having like, oh, actually there was this portion that was like beautiful or wonderful or good, or I can like, you can see and understand. And I didn't get X, Y, and Z. And when you look at something like this, even the way that we go about life, like I can look at something like my binge eating that I did as a kid, and I can go, oh, I can see what was up. I can see that your heart was longing for this. And this didn't get you what you actually needed.
100%.
And there's alternatives to this that are going to be long lasting, and they're going to be fully impactful, and they're going to bring what, and I think that that's a really good thing to point out. Yeah.
I really love that. And the idea of like, there's almost this idea of like sort of updating that part of us a little bit. Like this protective part might still think I'm a little girl who needs to eat the jar of marinara sauce.
Totally.
And that's okay. Like holding compassion and acceptance for like, yeah, I'm really sorry that you still think that you still feel the feelings of we're in our family house and need to eat the jar of marinara sauce. That's really hard.
Totally.
And then also being like, hey, would you like an update? The update is adult Rachel has some other ways to get soothed.
Yeah. She has friends that she can connect to. She can use her words and ask for help. And
I can connect inside of myself in a way that I couldn't as well. Like I think all trauma or, all long-term suffering like that is in some way a separation from self.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't mean to make extreme statements, but that'd probably be close enough.
Yeah,
To
totally.
something I could say. So the idea is like, and I can actually drop in and meet my needs in a way that little girl couldn't. So there's a little bit of an update there, an update for that part of me.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to say, going back to the beginning of this conversation, is that a lot of people live from their neck up. So they live up in this logic space that there's almost like a barrier around the neck area, the collarbone area. And it's just like, I am
It's a good analogy.
So not going to go past this barrier to whatever is down below. And so a lot of times, like, I'm thinking about like how you were sitting there, you're not locked up in your head area.
Yeah.
So, which means you become present with everything below it. You become present with your body and the emotions inside of your body. So what your ability to become present with yourself gives you the capacity to articulate a lot of what's happening inside of this.
Yeah.
And I've found that a lot of clients in the past, in order for them to get the breakthrough, we had to figure out like
how to get them inside.
Yeah. And how to acknowledge like, oh, this is, because a lot of them would say, oh, this is just who I am. I'm just a logical person. And it's the who I am. I'm like, no, this isn't actually the truth of your being. This isn't who you are. Who you are is a fully connected person that's present inside of all of this space and has the capacity to articulate your needs and your wants, your desires, things like that. And you have the capacity to articulate, the experiences that you're having. But, you're hiding behind the idea of this is just who you are, which again is a protective thing inside of itself.
Totally.
So that and you're not bad for it. It's just not like it's served you only so far and so well.
Yeah.
And it's for you to move forward into actually getting what you do need, you're going to have to surrender your protective barrier between your head and the rest of yourself.
100%. Yeah. There's a saying that I like to think about all the time, which is this is very therapy speak, but like what was once adaptive is now maladaptive.
Right.
Basically. So like what was once a brilliant idea now is what is stealing from me, from my life.
Which I think that even as we're talking, like one of the things that you were able to get right in the early part of this conversation is you're connected to yourself enough.
Yeah.
And because of being able to be present with yourself and face the fear of communication, like shame could have shut you down or fear could have shut you down to be like, oh no, I'm good. You're actually like, oh, I'm going to create an invitation and articulate what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So what it did is it unlocked a need that started getting met.
Yeah. It's a good way of verbalizing it.
Yeah. Because all of a sudden I'm able to sit there and, not always can people know how to then respond or whatever, but what did you notice that I did from my body posture to the communication?
Well, I mean, I think you sent me a lot of signals of safety. You can't see because you are all on a podcast. But Justin was sitting across from me and just doing all of those things that I was talking about that I wanted from my dad so much, right? Like he had warm, what I think of as like crinkly eyes, which is my favorite type of eye gaze. And just had a posture that was leaning towards me and softened towards me. And like just that experience of those sort of, even just that small, just glimmer of that need that I had when I was a kid. And then again, like you're saying, my ability to be present in this moment allowed me to just sort of go, this is a moment that I can receive what I need. This is a moment that I can receive love. And then as a result of that, really felt immediately more relieved and relaxed in my body, in a sense of almost like that part of me that was a little bit freaking out. Got to sort of go, okay, we're going to be okay.
And what you could have done, going back up. So did you notice when I leaned forward?
Yeah.
And I purposely leaned forward.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh, me leaning back is going to communicate that I'm away from her. I'm going to lean in to be present inside of this space so that she can actually feel me coming into the space that she's in. But what it did, like what you could have done is not only could you have denied that you were having problems, but you also could have gotten
Totally.
angry at yourself about the fact that you're not fully there, and which would have caused even more anxiety for you.
Totally. Fighting against our own system. Yeah, 100%.
Which could have turned into totally freezing up and locking up.
Totally.
And not being able to communicate, disconnecting totally from your body and exiting, and then being like, I don't even know what we talked about. Because that's a lot of what happens is the more that we not only deny what we need, but then get angry at what we need or angry about what's going on inside of us, we become our own self-abusers.
Totally.
And so as that war begins to rage between us and our own heart just goes, I can't do this. I can't do this. It shuts down.
Yeah.
It goes into adaptive behavior that's become maladaptive, as you were saying. Yeah. And what it does is it oftentimes will perpetuate a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%. That's a really good point. Yeah.
And so we think that we're hacking the system by either ignoring or getting angry at ourselves, but we're only perpetuating the system. And then we're going, oh, I felt really rejected in that. Because our walls go up, we become prickly pears.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And then we get mirrored that naturally, right? But we're not even aware that that's part of what's happening is I get prickly. And then what is most people response to that? If you're not aware and you're not consciously trying to respond in an opposite way, then you'll naturally just mirror the prickly back to me. Right. And then the story in my mind is going to be, see, Justin is prickly. See, I proved it.
I knew it.
Yeah, exactly.
I knew that I couldn't trust. See, all guys are like that or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of whatever the tale is that we tell ourselves about something, it gets proved.
Yeah. And then this is part of what I really encourage people is if you can sink in, if you can be present and just even narrate vulnerably, most people actually really love responding to vulnerability. Like I found that in truth. Not all the time. Like people often do get triggered or scared of vulnerability, but a lot of people really genuinely do just want to meet us where vulnerability is at. Like I think that's one of the most beautiful aspects of humanity is we have a common moment of me too. I know what it's like to feel scared. I'm in it with you, right? And then if I can soften and I can be vulnerable and let you meet me there, then what often can happen is I can be like, see, this is the disproving of the story that I've had before, right? Like this is a moment that is disproving my original story, which was anytime I public speak, what if it's going to be scary? Is Justin going to be like my dad and not nod and not give me good facial cues? Or totally. Is this going to be evidence that these experiences are always going to feel so scary and traumatizing and hard for me? But instead being able to be like, oh, this is information and evidence that this is every day. Speaking is becoming safer for me. Every day being open with a world of people is becoming a place that I get to be more and more authentic and more myself and more just as I am present here in the moment, narrating to you. And it's just there's something really almost holy in my mind about just allowing ourselves to experience that disproving evidence.
Yes.
That is saying this is evidence of love. Evidence that I can keep being radically brave and there's going to be someone here to catch me, or there's going to be some sort of resource, or there's going to be some sort of moment to prove to me that this is safe. This is safer for me than I ever knew could possibly be possible for me. And just, I think that's one of the major things that have helped me in my life story is just really allowing myself to absorb experiences that are disproving my theory. From childhood, like, no, see, like, here's a moment that Justin is safe for me, and that leaders are safe, or that men are safe, or that speaking is safe. And I'm going to let myself file this away in my body so that I can remember it. And I like to use this term, like, bookmark this experience.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I'm saying, like, I'm bookmarking this experience and putting a little star on it that's saying, remember this next time you get scared. And if you can have that in your mind, like, remember this next time you get scared, eventually, I do that enough times, I now have a Rolodex of disproving my original theory, which is that it's really scary whenever I do anything in public. Well, sometimes it's scary. Also, there's a bunch of other evidence to prove it.
I like the language you used of Rolodex. Oh, here's a Rolodex that I have.
Yeah, 100%.
People are like, the younger generation is like, what the hell's a Rolodex?
Sorry.
I have notes on my phone.
Totally. Yeah.
But one of the things that I was thinking is that a lot of people have buckets that have holes inside of them. And they don't actually store the information of loving moments.
It's a really good way of saying it.
So they'll gloss over moments in such a way that when that water gets dropped into the bucket, it goes
runs right through them. Yeah.
Totally.
I heard someone say the other day, it's like what often happens in our brain is our brain latches onto our negative bias like Velcro, like sticks to it, and that it that positive experiences run through us like water through the sieve was the analogy that they gave. Yeah. And so they were talking about confirmation bias, and they were saying part of the thing that we do is we're not trying to get people to let go of the idea that there could possibly be threat. You try to not negotiate yourself out of that. My brain at least goes, fuck you.
Totally, 1,000%.
I have information, right? Like we can't, it's like a dog with a bone. I can't wrestle my brain out of remembering what was my experience. Completely. Like that's not going to be the thing that is real to me. Yes. But what I can often do is match that with remembering experiences of love. And so I'm in a way that helps my threat systems relax because it's saying, oh, I'm not trying to like yank that away from you. Yeah. I'm not trying to tell you that there's no things that could possibly hurt you in life. Like that, no part of us is going to believe that idea.
It's not true. There's always going to be things that are going to hurt us. There are threats in the world.
Yeah. And, but the idea of also pairing that with remembering experiences of love, then often what happens is our system believes, hey, there are experiences of pain and they don't last forever. And I move through them. And then there's resources both in the middle, before and after those experiences.
Good. Yeah, because ultimately we need to know that there's a resolution for the threats.
That they end. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's incredible. And so I know that we're getting towards wrapping this up, but one of the things that I did so deliberately, you were talking about the Rolodex, is I went back in my history and I started filling the Rolodex in my history. I started asking the question, where was love present? Yeah. So that I could have a historical Rolodex, because the story was like love wasn't present. I wasn't cared about.
Yeah, that black and white story. Like,
correct.
All of my childhood was like this. All of my parents were like, all of my relationship with their parents are like this. Right. All of my, with me, it's all of my, when I'm triggered, all of my relationship with my husband is like this. Right. Yeah.
And it's hard because people don't know how to hold the tension of somebody could hurt me and bring love to me. And it's confusing on where to put that. Right. And so it's learning how to build the muscle inside of ourselves that like, here's the love that these people had the capacity to reflect. It does not disregard the painful experiences that they also participated in. Yeah. However, what it can do is it can build a truth that there was love and pain that coexisted.
It's existed side by side at the same time. Yeah. That's really powerful.
And I get that that's hard to do because like, you think about circumstances where there's a heavy amounts of abuse and it's confusing of like, well, what do I do with this abuse that existed here, but then they showed up loving here? And it's kind of like, how do I put that as a bucket inside of me? Does it even feel safe for me to receive the love that someone had the capacity to give while being so abusive? Does that end up meaning that I give them power that in my heart and my life? Does that mean that I can't have boundaries with that person? And, and those are things that people have to work out within their own soul of like, all right, 100%. Well, I may not be able to have the capacity to feel safe enough to absorb the portions of loving expression that this person gave because of the expression of abuse that happened inside of it. However, there are a lot of other people and circumstances that even in their imperfections of their humanity, they were giving love away that I dismissed because I didn't know how to absorb, because my walls were up towards people who, because of everything felt like a threat. And so one of the things is I did, going back to, I started figuring out what were the things where there was compassion, there was care, there was kindness, where were the different avenues that it came from then. And then I started building that muscle now. And like you said, the Rolodex, I'm going through consistently like, yeah, but love was here and love is there. And it didn't replace the pain and negate the pain. What it has done is help me to walk through the pain. It's helped me to walk through into resolution places.
Yes. And I love the phrase, just the word that you said, or the two words, safe enough.
Right.
I think that is a lot of times when we think about trying to build that Rolodex, we have an idea in our mind that's still black and white. That's like a moment that was 100% loving with a 100% safe person. Right. And I think the idea is I've started to think about safety on more of a continuum, more than a black and white way. Like, is this person safe or not safe? What I'm looking for is just safe enough.
Yes.
That means like you're safe. A lot of it is safe. Right? Like a lot of this, majority of the experience, right? And so for me, I've done the same where I've looked through my story and tried to compile my history. And that was really important, I think, in what you're saying is I'm not actually looking for the perfect moments or the moments of like extreme, euphoric, deliriously happy. I'm just looking for safe enough.
Yeah.
What was the moments of safe enough? And then can I be present with that experience, with reliving that experience, with re-experiencing that experience? How many times can I say that word? And allow that to impact me. And I really think the special sauce of healing is just the ability to receive love.
I agree too.
I think it's like the thing that is what stitches our souls back together is allowing ourselves to receive love. And so I've just become this, really tried to make it an endeavor in my life to receive as much love as I possibly can in my current life now, and allowing all the love that did happen in my life that I maybe didn't notice at the time, allowing it to go in and impact me and get to me at the core of me.
That's so good. I really appreciate you letting your day be hijacked and jumping into this space with us. I hope that people's takeaway ultimately from this, like first off, was your model of vulnerability coming into it. Like, I just love when those moments are modeled by someone, and they give us an opportunity of like, all right, what would it look like for me to like walk this out in some of my relationships and let people show up for me and communicate what's really going on. I hope that they're able to catch something from that. I really hope that people are really hearing this message of what it looks like to begin to gather love. Really in a lot of aspects.
Gather love.
And really allow ourselves to absorb it. And asking the question, am I someone who has a bucket that has a hole in it? Or am I capable of actually filing stuff inside of a Rolodex? And if I'm not, beginning to ask like, why?
Yeah.
What is the reason that I have a bucket with a hole in it? What can I do to begin to contemplate that? Because again, once you can plug that hole and you can begin to build a case for love inside of your life, that's where, again, the truth of our being starts getting revealed. That's where all the stuff that we're surviving in, trying to survive threats and all of that other stuff starts falling away. And organically, we begin to step into the things that we long for, long for of who we are, how we're responding to the world.
Yeah.
And how we're experiencing it.
Yeah.
So
beautiful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it's a great honor and privilege to be here as always and get to share this with you.
I appreciate you. Is there any way that people like that, if people wanted to contact you and talk to you about consulting or anything else, or is there availability?
I mean, I think you probably could find your way to my Instagram. I'm not always the best poster, but I'm a good remembering to direct message people back. But Instagram is just Rachel Hughes Consulting.
Cool.
And then if people want to email me, it's literally the same, rachelhughesconsulting@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. I love you, kid.
I feel loved by you. And I love you back.
I'll take it. I feel it.
Good.
Go away, everyone. Bye.
Bye.